Hey everyone, today I want to take a little time to do a general broad preview of the 2022 NA Academy season. I'm going to go through all 10 teams and what their rosters are and kind of what the main talking points, main storylines, and overall expectations might look like for those teams. So let's jump right into it. Let's go alphabetically through the Academy rosters. And, for people who follow the Academy scene really closely, there might not be a whole lot new for you to learn here, but for people who are looking for kind of an introduction and an overview of what this is going to look like, hopefully this will be helpful for you. So we're going to start with 100 Thieves Academy, alphabetically first in the list. They've got a roster of Gamsu, Kenvi, Jimian, Wixie, and Busio. And so this looks like it should be a really strong roster, and their goal really is that they can win Proving Grounds tournaments. They can win one of them, maybe they can win both of them. It's going to depend a little bit on how some pieces come together, but I think pretty high expectations here. So let's start by talking about Kenvi, because I think he's the kind of the big piece here. Kenvi's goal, I thought he was ready for the LCS for this year, but if you look at kind of what's been said publicly, he wanted to be on a top 5 LCS team. Those teams didn't have a need for a player in his position, a jungler, who would be a rookie jungler. They're looking for something a little more proven. And so he opted to stay in Academy and didn't want to go to a bottom 5 team, even though from what I've heard, there were options and potential there. Buyouts notwithstanding, maybe the negotiations wouldn't have happened anyways. Kenvi's big goal, though, is to use this year then to put himself in a position where maybe there will be a top 5 opening, or maybe he relaxes his expectations a little bit and says, I'm going to work my way up from the bottom half of the LCS. What he needs to accomplish and achieve is he needs to develop more leadership skills, more vocality. This is based on not me like sitting on a comms or anything, but more information that I've gathered and heard from people. He really needs to stomp Academy this year. He already looked like one of the best junglers in Academy in 2021. If he's not, decisively top 2 jungler or maybe the best jungler in Academy, he's not in a better position a year from now than he was today or was in October, November. So he really needs to be dominant, because he was already good enough that on his own merits, he deserved an LCS spot. Busio is another really big piece to talk about here. He's probably the next big prospect up in 100 Thieves' eyes. He's a former mid laner turned support, a year ago, and worked his way through on their amateur side. Then they promoted him to Academy towards, right before the summer roster lock, so that they could give him a multi-year contract and retain him like they did with Tenacity and Kenvi before. But I haven't had a lot of opportunity to watch him play in a really strong context yet. So we're going to have to see whether he can kind of show a level of play that merits the amount of hype that the org puts on him. Jimian is someone he's coming over from the PCS region, so an import mid laner. I haven't learned a whole lot about him yet, but by default, I have fairly high expectations for, when you're bringing in someone with PCS experience to play in your Academy team, you are expecting this player is worth it, right? I can't imagine he contests Abadaga for a role in the LCS team, but maybe he's going to be someone who contests, the spot for like the best Academy mid laner. There are lots of good Academy mids this year, so that's not like a clear path or a shoe-in by any means. But those are kind of the default assumptions, and he's someone that I'm going to be watching very closely over the first few weeks, especially to start to set some baseline for who this player is, what his goal is. But really, you look at him and you probably think he's someone who's coming in to help the Academy team win, because I know that the org has an approach of, we want some really strong prospects with high ceilings, but we want them to be able to win along the way. To get that experience of winning, you develop better in a winning team and winning team environment. So he kind of seems like a piece that's there, along with Gamsu, who's very experienced in esports overall and in League of Legends as well, to provide kind of some leadership and some winning for the rest of the kind of younger prospects. And Jimian himself can be viewed as a prospect. It's just a little less clear promotion path when you're an import. Speaking of Gamsu, he's on, I'm pretty sure, a 1-year contract. He's pretty clearly, a veteran piece, help them win, help them learn how to be a pro, and hold down the place until Sniper's old enough to get promoted next year into Academy. So, that's what his role is here. Wixie is someone who I like quite a bit. Kind of like how there's a lot of skill in mid lane in Academy this year. There's a lot of young AD players, and there have been for a couple of years now in NA, who are all kind of around a similar level, and you're just waiting to see who emerges enough to be, that LCS contender. I think he's got a good environment to make himself really visible. I think with Gamsu and the way he likes to play, you're not likely to be playing through top lane a whole lot. More likely to be playing through mid and bot. Wixie has, strong veterans and strong, whether it's an LCS veteran or Academy veteran, whatever it is, to set him up really well to succeed. And they're probably going to play through bot lane quite a bit. So, he's going to be someone to keep an eye on, definitely. So lots to be interested about and excited about for 100 Thieves. Lots to talk about. Every player is worth watching on some level. But let's move on to the next team up, which is Cloud9 Academy. Very interesting team for a completely different set of reasons. So they're running with, nominally, Darshan, Malice, Copy, King and Zven as a kind of a combo, and Isles. Lots of experience on this team. Darshan, obviously been around for a very long time. Copy has a full year in Academy now. Isles has a full year in Academy and time in Oceania before that. King and Zven. So the story here, in case you're not familiar, is Zven, since Malice is an import from Europe, and since Cloud9 have 2 imports in the LCS, you're only allowed 3 major region imports across both teams. So Zven cannot play unless somebody else was sitting, and they're not going to be. So King is going to be playing their actual Academy competitive games, but Cloud9 have said Zven is going to be getting most of the scrim time, internal kind of practice time. So it's a really strange dynamic and something that I don't think has ever been tried before. Cloud9 are being very overt in stating, we don't care about winning and losing on the Academy stage. So we've got King so that we have an eligible lineup, but we're really more concerned about using this team to push the LCS team, to help them practice and learn, to play kind of in-house mix and match scrimmages or solo queue type setups. So I don't know what that's going to look like when they actually compete on the stage. In terms of Academy as a place to develop talent, the only player here that they're really developing at this point is Copy. He's got reasonable upside, but I wouldn't call him a blue chip prospect. I don't think he's threatening to break into the LCS, but maybe this year he can take that step. Malice is someone who, I don't know a whole lot about as a player, but he's someone that LS has a lot of relationship with. My understanding is he's coming in to provide a certain level of coaching mixed with playtime. I don't know what to expect and how good he'll be. I have no idea what to expect on how good this team will be. If you just look at the names, even with just like Darshan, Zven, and Isles, or I guess King and Isles in this case, they should compete quite well and they should be an upper level team. But given their unique practice environment, I don't know. And also their approach, if they don't really care that much about winning the games and they just go out there and they want to learn from them or whatever, they're not going to win as much. So there's not really a compelling reason to watch them as a contender. You can watch them as kind of a measuring stick opponent, see who can beat them, who struggles to beat them, and watch them academically. Like, how is this really strange setup going to work out? That's kind of what you look at it for them. But weird team. Moving on. So next up we have CLG Academy. Their lineup here is Dokla, Rosethorn, Triple, Prismal, and Breezy. So lots of experience here between LCS and Academy levels. Very solid. I'd call them a mid-range Academy team with potential to move into upper depending on kind of coaching and how well they click. They're respectable, but they're kind of uninspiring as a talent option. The player here that I look at as a prospect is Rosethorn, who showed up pretty well at Scouting Grounds a couple of years ago. I thought he grew quite well during the Academy year in 2021. Needs to have the same amount of growth, and then maybe he'll look like an LCS option if he grows that same pace in 2022. The rest of the players are, they've been around, they're solid, what you're going to get from them, and they should be able to contend, or at least, be kind of a dark horse. Prismal is a really interesting one because I've been pushing for him for a couple of years now when he was in the Golden Guardians organization and kind of before that to be someone who I thought could, he'd shown enough that let's give him a try in LCS and see if he can stick, kind of a fringe LCS player. But in CLG, he's really unlikely to get LCS time unless Luger somehow shockingly bombs. I don't think he's as good as Luger, but maybe something strange happens there. It's kind of an unfortunate position for Prismal to be in because he's an upper level Academy player. But if his 2020 and 2021 performances didn't get him an LCS shot, I'm not really sure how much more he can do. I don't know if he can position himself any better with another year. So he'll compete well, and I'm sure I'll have lots to say about him. He'll show up in Academy standouts now and then. But at this point, it's becoming less and less a situation of viewing him as a prospect and somebody with LCS potential. Triple is in a sort of similar space, although he's had kind of his time a little bit more. He's had some opportunities. Maybe he pushes and contests Palafox a bit. I think they're not far off each other in level of play, but I do think Palafox is a bit better. And Breezy, you know, he's been around for a bit. I think he and Prismal will work well together, but I'm not sure Breezy is a threat to break into LCS either. So all these players are good Academy players. There's a little bit of potential in there to affect the LCS or to reach the LCS, but mostly this is a team that I think is going to be respectable in the Academy level. And maybe Prismal Rosethorn takes some steps and make something more of their year. And we get to Dignitas Academy, who, as of the time I'm recording this on on Tuesday, still have not officially been announced. If this video comes out before they've announced, I don't know. I really can't apologize at this point because, yikes, guys. Like, just get it out there, even if it's not fully officially right approved, it seems like. Their lineup is a player that I've known as Eclipse, but apparently is name changing to Boris. They have XU in the jungle, Dark Wings, and Spawn and JJ. So as a team, this is an ultra low budget roster. In terms of quality, it kind of looks like kind of a half step up from the top amateur teams. If this was an amateur roster, you'd say that's a great amateur roster. As an Academy lineup, you're like, it's got some interesting pieces in there. I'd say the most exciting member to me is probably XU. He's a good carry option in the jungle. He's a big Graves guy. He's got a lot of interesting, like I've seen a lot of interesting games out of him. And NA jungle has always been a position for the past several years where kind of these players seem to come up and you see who's going to actually be able to show the consistency and clean things up enough to kind of take the next big step. So he's someone I'm going to be watching on that front. Darkwings was one of the stronger amateur mids in 2021, and he's getting his shot, which I really like. But as I've mentioned before, the Academy mid pool is fairly strong this year. As much as I like his level of play, he's probably going to be a low-end mid in Academy, but I'm rooting for him to be more than that and to prove that I'm being too conservative on him. But he also is definitely worth watching kind of as a prospect. Spawn, I think there are a lot of people who feel he was underrated in 2021 and that he played better than he got credit for. And yeah, I'm open to that idea. I think he didn't catch my eye a whole lot kind of actively, when I'm watching these games, and sometimes I'm watching 2 games at once and you can't be closely monitoring every single player at a time. So the players kind of need to step up and do something that catches your eye and go, oh, that's interesting. That's worth writing down. Again, this year, I think with the team he's on, it's going to be a little bit hard for him to stand out. And I think just as a personality and a style, he's a little bit of a quieter person and a quieter player, but kind of has some good mechanical moments that I've spotted. Does his job, I think, quite well. And he's in that mix of kind of young North American bot laners who might break through. So another player kind of very worth watching, and JJ kind of being the veteran anchor here. And yeah, Boris or Eclipse, I don't know him that well. I can't say that he really caught my attention in the past year, but we'll see what he brings to the table. So this is a team that I think is going to struggle to compete at the Academy level. Should be pretty good against the amateur teams. We'll see what they're able to do by Proving Grounds and how much they're able to learn and develop, because they do have a lot more unrealized potential than some of the other teams here. But I think their ceiling could be, mid Academy, but their floor I think is going to be a little on the low side. Next up, we've got Evil Geniuses. So this is a lineup of Surdy, Tomio, Soligo, Kaori, and Skytech. So a lot of this came out of Evil Geniuses prodigies. So Surdy and Tomio are promotions. Tomio got promoted late last year when contracts moved up to help with the LCS team. Skytech has worked his way up now. And then you've got 2 veterans kind of in the core, the 2 veteran carries. I've said elsewhere that I really like the way they constructed this roster in relationship to the LCS team, because your 2 veterans, Soligo and Kaori's coming over from the TCL, has played there for a couple of years now. And of course, Soligo has been up and down LCS Academy for a couple of years now. These are the guys backing up the 2 young players in the LCS, Jojo Pian and Danny. So these are options for if things are really bombing on the LCS front, both of these guys can step in and should be able to hold their own and kind of mix and match or push each other. So I really like that. And then you've got the 3 kind of more pure development pieces in the other roles. You've got Tomio, who's probably the leading prospect on this team right now. In my eyes, from based on what I've seen, he's a really high energy, very vocal guy. Plays a lot of different styles. He's got lots to learn, but I think he's shown some strong potential to see what he can become. Skytech is, NA support prospects along with top lane. Those are the two positions where it's really hard to find strong prospects right now. And Skytech is one that EG found and are excited about. I can't say that I've seen a lot out of him yet when I watch him play. A mix of good and bad, but nothing that I'm like, aha, there's something here that really hooks me. But yeah, when the EG scouting staff is excited about a player, even if you haven't seen it yourself, it's worth paying attention. There are some orgs that have these really good scouting staff. I'd say 100 Thieves and Evil Geniuses being at the lead of them. So keep an eye on Skytech, and let's see playing with a player like Kaori, with someone like Soligo anchoring the middle of the map and able to kind of help everybody else kind of look good, which is something he's quite good at. We'll see what Skytech's able to turn into. And then similar for Surdy. As a top laner, he's someone, I have a little bit more of a read on him from last year. He trades very hard. He's constantly skill checking in lane. He's got a really diverse champion pool. So what he really needs is polish. What he really needs is experience playing against better players who are going to punish him for overreaching. He can't just, out micro people on these ill-advised trades and things like that. He's going to get hurt for that more often in Academy. And if he can learn well from that, and maintain kind of the strong hands that he has and the diverse pool that he has, pick up a lot from the coaching staff, he'll benefit as well from Soligo. If he has a good partnership with Tomio, he could turn into something here. And like I said, top lane is a bit of a tough place to find really strong prospects right now, but he's one of the ones that's up there worth keeping an eye on. So really like the balance of this team, the 2 veterans, the 3 rookies, and see how it all comes together. I think coaching is going to play a huge role in whether this team is successful. I'd say the expectations for this team are fairly high variance on how good they could be, but their floor should be kind of in the mid-range, and maybe they climb up into that top range. Next up, FlyQuest Academy. We've got Philip returning, we have Tomo and Diamond returning, and then we've got Yuji and Spirax coming in at jungle and mid. That's, their bot lane is a very viable bot lane, kind of fringe LCS. I'd say both of them could go into the LCS or have been in the LCS for runs of time and looked fine. I'm not sure that they can really supplant Johnson and Aframu, but they're a good competitive core for this team that could move in if needed, if things are going wrong at the LCS level. They've shown that before. Philip is a top lane prospect, still looked very raw last year, so he needs to take another big step this year. Yuji is a kind of enigmatic player. He's technically an import coming in. He's played a little bit in collegiate. I'll be watching him very closely early on to kind of get a read on who he is and what he plays like. And Spirax is someone who was kind of on and off my radar in amateur, never really kind of ascended into that top level of, here are the players that I'm always, when they've got games, I'm going to go out of my way to try to watch them and learn about them. But now and then I'd see him play a game and I go, oh, okay, that's pretty good. So we'll see what he looks like here. I think as a team, I don't really view any of these players as blue chip prospects at this point, unless Yuji really comes in and surprises me, just since I don't know very much about him yet. They've got, like I said, a solid bot lane, but I think it's unlikely this team is going to contend for the upper level of Academy. And it's, to me, somewhat unlikely that any of these players develop into really core LCS pieces in the future. But that's the thing with prospects, is they can always kind of overachieve. And I've been wrong on players like this before. Golden Guardians up next. Now, they've remade themselves a fair amount, but in kind of strange way. So they've got Tony Top, they've got Iconic, Ryoma, Violet, and Chime. So these are all relatively familiar names, even if you haven't been watching Academy. Especially, Iconic, Ryoma, Chime, they all had LCS time last year or in the past. Violet is someone coming in from Oceania. He should, my expectation on him, without having watched him much, is he should kind of compete fairly well. He's got more experience than a lot of the kind of young NA bot laners here. I don't know if he's going to kind of excel beyond them or not, but we're going to have to find out. And Tony Top, I think, is kind of the real prospect on this team. Arguably Chime as well, but I think we've seen him a bit in the LCS so far. So there's a little less kind of uncertainty around him. Tony likes to play split pushers like Fiora, things like that. He likes to kind of to carry and pressure his lane, things in that nature. I'd say he matured somewhat during 2021, but he never really felt like he grasped his consistency and became a real solid difference maker. He had kind of on games and off games. So he's got a good environment here with, I think, the amount of experience and the quality of players around him that he could take a next step and maybe become that LCS option. He's a prospect worth watching, especially given that top lane is, relatively thin on prospects. Ryoma, of course, he might be the best mid in Academy this year. He was arguably the best mid in Academy last year. So, there are a few candidates to push him. Talking about some of them along the way. For him to push a Blaze Olive in the starter role for LCS, I think is pretty unlikely. If a Blaze Olive regresses a bit, maybe Ryoma can step in there. I think he's a low-end LCS option who can, if the rest of your team is the right style, he can fit in quite well and do his job there. But I think mostly he's going to be the person, leading this team, being the core kind of anchor and carry of this team. We'll have to see kind of how that helps the rest of these players, because you then have Iconic and Chime, and then you've got, of course, Tony as the kind of younger prospect. Iconic and Chime are a strange case here because they were both in LCS with Golden Guardians at the end of last year. And so it's strange that they would hold on to them but move them down to Academy. If Golden Guardians didn't stick with them in LCS from 2021 into 2022, you have to ask yourself, what are the chances that these players get another LCS shot with Golden Guardians? Probably not that high, especially that they, brought in new players in front of them, signed out of free agency. So, it's a little bit of an odd roster build choice to me. You'd think that if you're going to kind of say these players are not our LCS future, you'd try to release them from their contracts and bring in some younger prospects, right? Players who you haven't seen at this level, who have a little bit more of an unrealized ceiling. You'd think that if you had a full year in LCS like Iconic and, a bunch of time in Academy and some time in LCS like Chime, that you'd kind of have your read on them already. But maybe Golden Guardians think that Academy is going to be a really good opportunity for them to develop and take a big step, and maybe they'll, surprise and get that chance to move up, or get that chance to move into another org and be more valuable to them. So we'll have to see what happens with them. Overall, I think this roster, Ryoma's a strong player, Tony Top is a pretty good prospect, and we'll have to see how well they can compete. Probably kind of a mid-range Academy team. Immortals is an interesting one. So they've got kind of, when we looked at Evil Geniuses and said that they had kind of 2 veterans and 3 prospects, Immortals are kind of the inverse of that. So they've got 2 prospects and 3 veterans. Concept and Chad and Top and Jungle are the prospects, and then you have Pretty, Arrow, and Joey, who have all been around in various forms and various time ranges. I think this team has pretty good potential overall just to compete, right? Pretty, Arrow, and Joey provide a very high floor. And then Chad and Concept provide kind of the ceiling on top of that. When Chad stepped in with Thieves Academy at the end of 2021, I think he looked very good with Ryoma, Luger, and Poom. So the question is, with this different set of kind of bot half of the map veterans, can he advance similarly? Can he perform similarly with them? And I think there's a similar quality of players here for him to kind of get that chance. Concept was someone who, over 2021, he didn't stand out to me personally when I was watching him here and there in kind of amateur tournaments. But late in the year, he saw a big surge of attention. And going into scouting grounds, when I personally wasn't rating him much, I got a lot of pushback from kind of coaches, casters, people in the scene saying, no, this guy's somebody that you're underrating, who's really worth watching. So, take that for what it is and say different people have viewed this player, I guess, more closely than I have and have pretty strong opinions of him, or high opinions of him. So he's someone that he's another one of these players that I'll be watching especially close in the first few weeks to get a sense of what do Immortals have here. So of course, I'm high on Pretty as kind of just a competitive player right now, somebody in that group of contenders in the mid lane in Academy, pushing the level of mid lane up. He's got PoE ahead of him. good luck taking that spot over, but, we'll have to see what the future holds. I think he is someone who could fit in the bottom half of LCS mid laners and look pretty reasonable. I think Immortals management, from what I've heard, is even higher on him than I am. So that's good. I think he'll compete well. He'll help this team to succeed. And an Arrow then comes in. He was out of the scene for a bit. He's got a green card now. He's as of partway through last year, he was playing and coaching for Wildcard. And so in this lineup, he should be more of kind of a pure player. He's not a player coach, but obviously he still brings that leadership. He still brings that ability to kind of teach his younger teammates, especially. So seeing him get that shot, I think is going to be a fun one to watch as well. And seeing how he stacks up against these much younger players who he'll be facing off against. So overall, yeah, I'm pretty pleased with this team and the amount of prospects they have, the amount of potential they have, and how well I think they'll be able to compete. Let's continue things with Team Liquid Academy, and almost this entire team should be familiar and kind of comfortable from last year. The one change is Bradley coming in top lane, and then you've got Armeo, Harry, Jan, and Ayla. Bradley is, so he's coming in replacing Jenkins, kind of the Jenkins-Dokla duo. He was a mid laner in 2021, but his role swapped into top lane, presumably, and I'm not sure if he's stated this publicly or not in a direct way, but presumably he role swapped because it's hard to break into the LCS as a mid laner, and he thinks he's got a better path to the LCS if he learns top lane. So the big question is, will his mid lane skill set translate well into top? So he was, my take on him has been, a lot of assassin play, very handsy, aggressive kind of a style. Some of that will translate well into top lane, but a lot of it also then comes down to communication and timing and knowing when to give something up in order to allow your team to play to the other side of the map. Kind of knowing how to sacrifice a little bit more than a mid laner normally has to. So these are things that he might have to pick up and might struggle with potentially. And that's kind of what the big questions are going to be there. On the rest of the team, we know what we're getting here. This was a team that was at the top end of Academy with Jenkins. Bradley, if he's as good as Jenkins by like midsummer, it'll be a big success. We'll have to see. I think he'll do fine. I'm not sure if he'll quite reach that level. I think Jan is the other kind of prospectish player here worth watching. I think at times he looks very good. He's one of the leading candidates of that group of young North American bot laners. At times he looks very good and he carries well, and I think he's got a very good support option in Ayla to help him with that. Ayla is a strong player who is an LCS quality support in my opinion. But Jan does struggle at times with kind of threat assessment positioning. He gets caught out a little too much, not quite standing in the right place in a fight, it seems. So in isolation, he's very much a prospect worth watching, but will he be a top 5 bot laner in Academy? I mean, there are a lot of options that he's competing against. He's right in that mix. So he has to progress and do more and better than these other players who are trying to outshine him. It helps that he'll probably be on a winning team here. Armeo and Harry and Ayla are all very strong kind of top end of Academy players in their positions. And if Jan and Bradley can both perform pretty well, I think Team Liquid again are going to be a top end of Academy kind of a team. So there's also the weird note about the start of the season that possibly Ayla is going to be starting in the LCS for a while if CoreJJ has kind of issues with his visa, or if there's something going on there with kind of getting his green card and being able to play as a domestic player in the LCS. So we'll have to see what happens with all of that. But long term, presumably Ayla will be the Academy support and kind of helping Jan take those steps. So watch Bradley, watch Jan, see what happens with Ayla, and this team should be, another really good measuring stick team to see which Academy teams can compete with them and try to exceed them. Finally, we have TSM Academy. So we got a couple of rhymers in the top end. We got Viper and Hyper. Then we have Takeover, Instinct, and Yursan. So Hyper, Takeover, and Yursan are all returning. I'd say Takeover and Yursan are still the players to watch here. Takeover has a lot of skill, but also a lot of inconsistency. And import mid laner coming in who's going to also be contesting for that kind of best mid laner in Academy kind of group. I'd say between him, Ryoma, Soligo, maybe Jimmy, who I don't know a whole lot about. Pretty, like these are all some very good mid laners. I mean, Harry's in that group too. Most of the mid laners in the academy are very respectable. Triple, you could argue into that. Copy, I think, does fairly well. So Takeover might stand out because he's got a little bit higher individual moments than some of these other players. A little bit of a higher variance player. And then Yursan, when he's on Alistar, Nautilus, these things that he can make really big engage plays on, he can really pop off. But he has to diversify a little bit more, and be able to play some more different styles and champions, and improve some communication with the team. So that's something to watch for them as well. Instinct kind of comes in as a dark horse prospect. I'd say slipping in the bottom end of that group of NA bot laners who are worth watching. I'm not quite as excited about him as I am, Wixie or Jan or some of these players. But somebody that has the potential to exceed some of them. A challenge for him, I think, is that with Viper and with Takeover in the solo lanes, there may not be that many opportunities for Instinct to step up and kind of be the guy. We know Viper from the past year playing like his Vayne and his very heavy carry kind of approach and out microwing everybody, that he's probably going to want to have more of that same kind of thing. Takeover, again, like I've already said, aggressive player, goes for big plays, works best with a lot of resources. So is Instinct going to come in and be able to be like the big leading carry? Probably not that often, unless the other players make some concessions to him. So it might be a little bit harder for him to stand out. But I'm going to be watching, and trying to get a sense of that without looking quite so closely at him. Without doing specific VOD review of him, I guess I might have to do a little bit of that to get a read on it. Some of these players, especially if you are kind of multi-screening it, like since they have the parallel broadcasts, if you really want to get a read on them, you have to separately do specific VOD review and just watch them the whole time. So it'll depend on how much time I have available to do that. Hyper looked like kind of a mid-range academy prospect, and I think I kind of expect the same for him. Not a blue chip to me. So overall, expectations for what I think the year is going to look like competitively. I think, hopefully I've talked enough kind of through who the main prospects are, the people that you want to watch to see if they're going to have LCS potential, who the main teams are. I think the top end of Academy should be Thieves Academy, Team Liquid Academy still. Cloud9, if their setup works, right? And if they care about winning. But they're kind of a weird one, bit of a wild card that way. I'd say kind of the dark horse group that's chasing for this is going to include CLG, Evil Geniuses, Golden Guardians, Immortals. I think all of those groups have enough skill and enough experience in them that they could climb into that top group. And then I think we've got a few teams that are going to be chasing the rest of the league, and that would be Dignitas, FlyQuest, TSM. TSM kind of feels like they're a half step ahead of the other two, but I think they'll be chasing the league a little bit more. And needing to prove something if they want to move up by summer into the higher groups. So overall, those are my expectations, and long-winded takes on these teams and these players. And I'll have a whole lot more to say about them as we go. Weekly coverage, summaries, highlighting certain players and things along the way. So stay tuned for all of that on oracleselixir.com and on the YouTube channel. And I hope you enjoy the year to come, because I know I'm going to.